Well, hello, that's me again. Today is May 9th. It's a victory day in Russia. And I have something to say about this whole situation. And obviously, everybody saw the parade and listened to Vladimir Putin's speech. But I want to try to start with this. And this is famous Soviet and Russian satirical magazine called Crocodile. This is from 1952. And as you can see yourself, it shows it's from the 10th May 1952, it shows the piece of the calendar with May 9th, which is the victory day in Soviet Union, and you can see those, what they call celebratory faces of the Western heads of states and those powers that be, and evidently they really are not happy. Actually, this is a perfect representation of what is happening right now. They never were, and we will talk a little bit down the road here about this, but look at this. And as I already stated, you heard Vladimir Putin and what he had to say about this whole situation with the world being at the turning point and that Russia again faces the combined West. So here it is. This is the representative of basically the puppet and the man without will, honor, or any skills, Mr. Scholz. And look what is written here. German Chancellor objects to World War II victory parade in Moscow. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has claimed this year's traditional Victory Day parade in Moscow was used by Russian President Vladimir Putin to flex his military muscles. Somebody has to explain to this lawyer who never worked a day of honest work in his life and who is completely bought and paid by the United States and have no free will whatsoever, that actually any kind of parade, any kind of military parade is designed to flex muscle and to show the military resolve and military capability of the country. If he didn't get it yet after the 38 years from 1945, and if Germany still thinks that they mean something, well, I have news for him. Germany is done as the nation. It eventually will be completely, which is happening actually right now, deindustrialized, and United States, who runs Germany effectively because Germany is an occupied country, they will achieve their main aims and objectives of the Morgenthau Plan, which at some point of time, and Hans Morgenthau explained it to Eisenhower. Eisenhower was absolutely appalled because Morgenthau wanted basically Germans to tend fields with the beets, grow beets and supply them for the European market. Well, looks like it's going there. So, and yeah, it's not Russia's problem, so Germany can actually live with its own choices. So, but Scholz, of course, continues that the European Union, however, shouldn't be intimidated by Russian leaders posturing. It's not posturing. Russia doesn't need European Union other than the market, and never again the foot of Russian soldier will step on the European Union soil. If they will be genocided there, it's their problem, and let Europe basically live as they live. As I already noted in my blog yesterday, that in this case, whenever they will be asking and screaming for help, and they will be doing this, especially when we see what is coming up in terms of the huge drought in Europe, and of course we have the situation with a forecast of much worse winter than was the previous one. So, and the third one, everybody even in Europe say it will be a disaster. Well, you know what? Mr. Scholz shouldn't be, in this case, in any position of power, as shouldn't be most of the governments of the Western Europe, if they want to survive somehow, and they will not survive without Russian energy. But Russia, dealing with the present-day people in Europe, doesn't want to do anything about it realistically. And then again, people who misunderstand what World War II was. World War II was at basically the quest of the unified Europe. Unified Europe, again, against Soviet Union in 1941. Those who do not understand, you can check your numbers, that French resistance had fewer people in French resistance than there were French people, for example, fighting in SS divisions like Charlemagne, as they call it, and other units for Hitler. So when people begin to recall Mr. de Gaulle, who is absolutely outstanding statesman and politician, he was a minority. French accepted Germans just quite, fine, and so this was the case for pretty much all parts of Europe with Nazi Germany, Hitler occupied. They loved it, actually, and they had no objection. For example, like Czechs. Czechs were producing their famous, vehicles ranging from the trucks to light tanks for Germany, for Nazi Germany throughout the whole war. Nobody even tried to do any kind of resistance thing, of course, until the May of 1945 has arrived, and Konev's armies and Talbuchin armies were rushing towards the Prague national uprising. Well, before that, there was very little in terms of resistance. At least Free French fought on the other theaters, including legendary Normandy-Niemen squadron which produced a number of heroes of the Soviet Union, outstanding French pilots. So there you go. So it was quite natural. And when you look at this and you begin to see that, oh my gosh, what is going on, here it is. This is one of the proofs that Poles, for example, not all, don't want to use the very broad brush, but there are segments of Poland who are absolutely Russophobic to the hysterical level, and guess what? The crowd of those people again stop the Russian ambassador to put the wreath and flowers on the memorial cemetery in Warsaw. They just didn't allow it. They asked him to take off people say it's St. George strip. Actually, it's Guards strip. But still, whatever it is, it's the symbol of the victory. And as you can see yourself, police didn't do anything. They just said, you know what, maybe you will do it later. As you might remember, last year they just poured the paint on his face. So that's how Poles, who probably wouldn't exist if not for the Red Army, they remember this. But then again, you cannot fix stupid. And when you go further, you will see yourself now the other thing, and this is just altogether ridiculous. Now, Russian Ambassador Antonov in the United States, he reported that United States threatened to revoke passport of the American veterans who wanted to go for the celebration of the May 9th to Moscow. And this is absolutely totalitarian, state actions. This is how the country, which prides itself on being democratic, operates today. And what was most important, and this is why the Russians are, in this respect, are very special people. Look what Mr. Antonov stated when describing the State Department's desire to sabotage American World War II veterans going to Russia is that, and I quote it for you, "This step is insulting not only for the veterans who fought against Nazism, but for all those who remember their sacred feat of heroism. We want to know that American veterans, frontoviki," he uses this Russian word frontoviki, frontline veterans, knew Russia is proud of their contribution in the common victory. That were the words of Mr. Antonov, Russian ambassador to United States. Well, and you may ask, what is the reason for United States or in combined West behaving so absolutely irrationally and with the hatred? Let me start with the fact that, and I will not really open any kind of the Pandora box here, because Americans don't know World War II history at all. And I'm talking about the Americans not knowing it, not just the lay people who have been fed brainwashing war propaganda by Hollywood. Most of the American war times movies, they are cringeworthy. It's difficult to even watch. And the question is not about chauvinism, it's normal. Some Soviet movies, for example, they do also present some kind of chauvinism. But there is another issue here that United States, especially in the war in Europe, while definitely contributing, it wasn't in any way something so magnificent and overwhelmingly huge. No doubt, D-Day was the largest and heroic amphibious operation ever conducted by any nation in the world, but people always forget that actually Soviet Union was asking for the opening of the second front from since 1941. Obviously, nobody expected it to be opened 1941. Then, of course, 1942. In 1943, Russians stopped asking. And if you want to see what was the reaction between London and Washington, you have to read David Eisenhower's incredible biography of his glorious grandfather, Dwight D. Eisenhower. This is the book which is a must read for anybody who wants to understand basically that practically everything the United States did in Europe was predicated or actually basically coordinated, starting from Tehran, with the actions of the Red Army. If not for the Red Army, there would have been no D-Day. And of course, there was another issues which pertained there actually purely operational strategic military matters. And here we come to this point that, as I already stated, when I say that Americans don't know the history of the World War II, I also can tell you that actually much of the American military doesn't know what World War II is. And of course, when you, as I already quoted to you, Misters Glantz and Jonathan House, the authors of the fundamental work, which was absolutely, it's more than primer, it's crucial work, the best historical work written on the Red Army and how the Red Army stop Hitler. American military doesn't know much about this. I mean, they still think that Patton was a great guy. I mean, well, Patton was rather against the background of magnificent commanders of the, be them Soviet, be them German, and even the people of the scale of Montgomery, Eisenhower, Hodges, and things like that. He was just the guy who commanded one army. He was a pipsqueak. And obviously, when Carlo D'Este, who pretends that he is military historian, writes about Patton as genius, I mean, there are some issues with that. The guy never faced a real Wehrmacht. But let's start with this. And so when we go to why they cringe and why they, as Crocodile, this Soviet and Russian satirical magazine, showed how they combined with suffers from the Victory Day parade celebrations, here it is. Let's read about why they love Patton so much, because it is primarily because of the ignorance and lack of understanding of a real serious war, how it is fought against the peer. And I'm talking again, if not for Mr. Glantz, David Glantz, promotion of the Slavic Studies department at some point of time in their General Staff and Command College in Leavenworth, Kansas, mostly what American military learned about World War II was from Germans. And of course, what Germans presented to Americans was the fact that, yeah, if not for this and that, you know, the winter, stupid Hitler, and that, they surely would have won. Well, and when you have people who think like that, here's Patton. He is Exhibit A. He is distillation, concentration, concentrated expression of what's wrong with the United States Army and why it cannot win wars. And here we are. We'll start with Patton on Russians, why he is loved by many in Americans. And here's what his quote. It's his from his own diaries and his records, which of course were preceded with the foreword by Mr. Atkinson. And here it is. This is what he writes about Russians. The difficulty in understanding the Russian is that we do not take cognizance of the fact that he is not a European but an Asiatic, and therefore thinks deviously. We can no more understand a Russian than a Chinaman or a Japanese, and from what I have seen of them, I have no particular desire to understand them except to ascertain how much lead or iron it takes to kill them. In addition to his other amiable characteristics, the Russian has no regard for human life and is an all-out son of a bitch, a barbarian, and a chronic drunk. Well, this is not just Patton, as you might remember. Mr. James Clapper, who was the big honcho in the national intelligence, he already stated that Russians basically, and it was 4 years ago, Russians basically are genetically damaged people. That Russians want to penetrate, to subvert, and they drew in by genetics. Obviously, no single son of a bitch on the mainstream United States media ever reacted to this, but hey, this this is the vision, and this is the view of Russia by majority in the top American echelons of power today. They hate Russians on the racial, cultural level, maybe because they are themselves uncultured people and derive from their basically culture, which apart from some magnificent, constitutional and liberty achievements, which have been there, not anymore, they're being removed as I speak to you, and some very short period of time of roughly 50 years when the United States literally saved itself because of the World War II from complete economic collapse, there's very little that they can present, obviously. And then, of course, when they go to the ancient cities of, for example, of Europe or Russia, they begin to hate it because they don't have anything like this. It is the very distilled complex of inferiority because most of them are uncultured people. Generally, any kind of product which is produced by Ivy League humanities education, be that international relations, let alone geopolitics, and especially American political sciences, scientists, they are generally uncultured people, and they read each other, they live in the echo chamber, and that's the basically horizon of their understanding of the world. But Mr. Patton is actually one of those, who is in the foundation of all that. And we can continue with this, why he is so beloved. And here's Patton also on Russians. And this is the guy who faced 10 tanks in Color Rain campaign and their other kind of forces, quote unquote. I'm being sardonic here, sarcastic actually, and he could still overcome them. But yes, this is what he says. Yes, I have seen them. They have chickens in their coops and cattle on the hoof. That's their supply system. They could probably maintain themselves in the type of fighting I could give them for 5 days. After that, it would make no difference how many million men they have, and if you wanted Moscow, I could give it to you. So the guy who is a pipsqueak compared to Erich von Manstein, Walter Model, Rundstedt, von Bock, just basically all those people with the Prussian military background, Guderian, just you can basically start counting those classic Prussian generals, some of them like Walter Model being, of course, he was a fanatical Nazi, but he was good. I mean, he was really good. And they commanded the numbers Patton never dreamt about. And when you listen to this and look at it and say, yeah, well, how long would Third Army face for, let's say, Manstein and von Bock or Model if it really had come to it, as it was on the Eastern Front. I don't think so for very long, but that was Patton. That was the guy who is beloved in the United States, although people do not understand that basically, practically, especially when you look at his Lorraine campaign, it's a clownship, it's a circus basically, and yet here we are, and he's the genius for war as they try to describe him. And so when you go over whatever he accomplished, which was very little actually, as some people still consider the fact that he turned to the north during the Battle of the Bulge. Obviously, these are from the people who do not understand what Battle of the Bulge was and what Hodges' First Army, before Hodges have been substituted with Montgomery has accomplished. But then again, it's explaining to people who have no clue. It's like explaining to the Mr. Petraeus or Mr. King what modern armed combined arms warfare is. They have no clue. And when they talk about people being called military scholars, it's laughable. But look at this. This is even the fact that Mr. Atkinson cannot anymore take from Patton, and that's what it is. Well, Atkinson writes about it, and this is in my first book. The creeping arrogance, the hubris which would cost the American army so dearly in Vietnam. Okay, you can continue now. Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever other campaign United States Army fought. Summing up the achievements of his troops in crushing the German counterattack on December 94, Patton, with pardonable pride, claims to have moved farther and faster and engaged more divisions in less time than any other army in the history of the United States, possibly in the history of the world. No country can stand against such an army. These memoirs are valuable not least in showing, however unwittingly, that a disastrous presumption of invincibility took root in the ranks of officers who led the American military after the World War II. Let me put it this way. Nothing changed. It was there, it's still there. You have the people in the armed forces which lost all of their campaigns against their subpar enemy, thinking that they still can take on the world. As I already stated, I don't know if Petraeus was taught mathematics. Patton, by the way, had huge issues with mathematics. He was also dyslexic, and so that is why he couldn't calculate. He didn't understand, for example, that Talbukin commanded 5 times the forces he met in Vienna, and the guy was still thinking that he can attack somebody. You know, it's just a classic delusion. And when you look at this and you begin to understand why they cringe, why they cannot maintain this straight face while watching our Russian armed forces march on the Red Square, because this is the square which saw so many people defeated. And I'm talking about not some kind Petraeus or Patton, for crying out loud. I'm talking people like Wehrmacht, I'm talking about Napoleon, I'm talking about Polish, who were at that time in 17th century basically the superpower of Europe. And when you begin to look at this, it's just like, are those people real? Are they for real? No, they are. That's the whole thing. But there is another part of American participation in World War II, which also I present usually those 2 examples, which are always is Exhibit A, if you wish, Exhibits A, about how the America doesn't really recognize the true heroism. And unless, of course, you're looking at some movies which barely fleetingly mention this on that, let me put it this way. Instead of making the movie about Patton, and of course the movie which is called The Bulge and Battle of the Bulge and things of this nature, but of course with this basically chauvinistic rah-rah, there should have been always remembering American heroes, some of whose heroic feats of heroism are incomparable, or for example Russians give them their very respectable due. And we'll start with this. If you ask any modern American youth who this guy is, they wouldn't even know. First, let's start with the fact that he is probably of wrong race nowadays and wrong gender and all that. He is a classic American kid, and his name is Truman Kimbro. And if we go to and start reading about Kimbro biography, you will recognize that there was a reason why he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor on December 19, 1944. And here it is. Here's his heroism, and there were kids like that. And why we don't have movie about this guy, I still don't understand. On 19th December 94, as scout, he led the squad, a squad assigned to the mission of mining a vital crossroad near Rocherath, Belgium. It's the Battle of the Bulge, as you know, the Christmas offensive. Driven back by the withering fire, Technical 4th Grade Kimbro made 2 more attempts to lead his squad to the crossroads, but all approaches were covered by intense enemy fire. Although warned by our own infantrymen of the great danger involved, he left his squad in a protected place and, laden with mines, crawled alone towards the crossroads. When nearing his objective, he was severely wounded, but he continued to drag himself towards and laid his mines across the road. As he tried to crawl from the objective, his body was riddled with rifle and machine gun fire. The mines laid by his act of indomitable courage delayed the advance of enemy armor and prevented the rear of our withdrawing columns from being attacked by the enemy. Here it is. I gave it to you. The biography of an incredible hero. Absolutely astonishing. Basically sacrificing himself. Yes, no happy end from Hollywood. Where's the movie about the guy? Can you tell me? Now, it's not really expedient today for the America to really pay attention to what is the real cost of the war. America never knew this. No American officer ever or soldier fought defending this country, but there were heroes. Where's the movie about Truman Kimbro? He definitely deserved that kind of the attraction and attention to his personality. No, nothing like that. Then, of course, we're going to the other thing of the American heroism in World War II. And there is no movie still. This, do you know what it is? Show this to any kind of the modern American guy. Well, most of the those guys will not, even with education, will not know what it is. It is about 1,500 tons displacement escort USS Samuel B. Roberts. It was called by Chester Nimitz there, and it was basically became legendary through the U.S. Navy at that time as the escort who fought like a battleship. If you look attentively at what these guys did, it is astounding what this small, with 252 millimeter guns, and look at this. During the Battle of Samar, they were escorting those other escort aircraft carrier. And this is the whole other thing about the Taffy 3, and Nimitz praised them just in one of the finest expression of the U.S. Navy heroism, which it was incredible. And here it is. They were facing the huge force of the heavy destroyers and cruisers from Japanese Navy. And they needed to defend their their escort carriers. And look at this. And they headed towards the heavy cruiser Chokai. The commanding officer Copeland announced, "We are making a torpedo run. The outcome is doubtful, but we will do our duty." With smoke as cover, Roberts steamed to within 2.5 nautical miles of Chokai, coming under fire from the cruiser towards forward 8, that means 203 millimeter guns. They continued and closing the distance, and essentially they closed the distance to such a way that basically they Japanese couldn't train their guns because they didn't have this low level angle elevation for their guns, and they launched 3 Mark 15 torpedoes with one blowing off Chokai's stern. After that, they started to pummel this heavy cruiser with 40 millimeter and 20 millimeter anti aircraft gun, until of course they have been hit by heavy artillery, Japanese artillery, and it doesn't take much for 203 millimeter shell to destroy such a small little escort. They lost 90 people there, and escort obviously was sunk with 120 sailors basically clinging to the 3 flotation devices. And so after that, what can I say? Yes, a lot has been mentioned about this wonderful ship, of their incredible heroism. But again, while there's a hall named after alumni hall, which is dedicated to Lieutenant Lord Garrett and his shipmates, there is other thing. Yes, there are some ships named after their Samuel Roberts, including one of the latest. It was scrapped already because it was getting old. Not Oliver Hazard, but Arleigh class first flight destroyer. And where's the movie about this? Russians made the movie about Varyak. Look up what Varyak is. That is American Varyak. This is just heroism, unbelievable. No movies, guys. Yeah, Hollywood is into making such garbage trash like Top Gun Maverick. And when you look at this, it becomes clear why they cringe. They don't even understand their own heroes. They really don't. For many of them today, especially in all kinds of the woke armed forces, those people are nothing. They are absolutely not respected. But then again, as I already stated, can you imagine David Petraeus commanding anything in Ukraine today? Yeah, he would be there. He is the iteration of the American General Patton. And that is a sad, sad reality. And this is what we are facing today. And Mr. Putin speaking to Red Square and to Russia and to the world was absolutely correct. It's the turning point, and yet again, Russia alone is facing the combined, well, grossly reduced by now might of the West, but everybody understood that it's a done deal. And while people discuss, as I already stated, all those tactical minutiae of whatever Mr. Prigozhin said and didn't say and whatever it means, reality is just look up the map, look up the correlation of forces and losses, and you will know everything you need to know. But most of all, you cannot understand anything there without understanding what World War II was for the Soviet Union and Russian people and how it was fought. And this American military, for the most part, doesn't know and doesn't understand. And when you have the heroes like quote-unquote General Patton being worshipped as great tactician, which he certainly never was. He was a very mediocre general with a lot of panache and a lot of pathos projected outside, or as the some people in his own army, in the U.S. Third Army and generally in the U.S. Army while fighting in Europe, knew him as a master of chicken shit. And this is the official name and title, which was, you can look it up in Paul Fussell, who served with him, and he was talking about the basically rumors which were going through the U.S. Army about this guy. As he said, for some reason he had the reputation for armored warfare. I mean, it's ridiculous. But here it is, and this is the victory day, and it was the victory day for allies too, and that is why Russians always wait for the open arms, heroic people of United States, of Great Britain, Canada, Poland, those people who fought against Nazism, and many of who today would be horrified and terrified seeing what happened to the United States, what happened to the combined West, which is descending in the depths of the insanity and actually what Russians called liberal fascism, because that's exactly what it is. And I can only quote Mr. Stalin. Well, actually it was Molotov first, but it was Stalin. Our cause is right, the victory will be ours, because the West is already being defeated, and I speak to you, and the military parade yesterday at the Red Square was just the proof of it. So this is what I wanted to tell you today, and as always, guys, my profound respect and thanks to my wonderful patrons. And those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel and support me through Patreon and buy me a coffee too. And I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.